While I was planning my Jane Austen dollhouse set, I naturally decided I wanted the dolls to be bunnies. Because that makes a lot of sense, right? So I thought I'd share the process with you. You can watch this video for a full-on tutorial to make your very own 6-inch bunny doll. The free pattern can be found on sweetbarsisters.com. I'll link it below. And if you'd like to follow along on this amazing Jane Austen bunny dollhouse journey that we're going on, be sure to subscribe to our channel below. Before beginning this project, you'll need to go to sweetbarsisters.com to download the free pattern. I'll put the link in the description below so you can find it nice and easily. Once you have the pattern, you can go ahead and cut out all of your fabric pieces according to the directions on each pattern piece. Once everything is cut out, you can go ahead and start sewing. I'm beginning with the ears. I've gone ahead and I've matched right sides together on the ear pieces, one from fabric A and one from fabric B. And then I'm going ahead and stitching around the ear, leaving the flat bottom open so that I can turn it. I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this entire project. There will be some points where we sew a 1/4 inch in and then we trim it a little bit. That's just because I feel like having the nice 1/4 inch seam is easy to work with, even though we have these real small pieces. And then we can trim it a little bit and they won't be bulky after we turn them. But the ease of sewing is just so much greater when we have those nice thick seams, I think. So after I've sewn my ears, I went ahead and I clipped just the tip of the ears in just a little bit, just to remove a little bit of the bulk of the seam. Now I'm going ahead and I'm going to sew the legs. I am again matching right sides together and I'm going to sew around the legs, leaving this time it's the top, but it's still that flat edge. We're going to leave open so that we can turn and stuff them later on. Again, we're using a 1/4 inch inseam, and you'll want to take these curves nice and slow. If you're having a hard time going around these small curves, you can adjust the stitch length on your machine to be a little bit smaller than you're used to working with, and that helps you go around those small curves a little bit easier. Now that we're done with the legs, we're going to do the same thing with the arms. Again, match right sides together and sew around the sides and bottom of the arms, leaving the tops of the arms open to turn and stuff. It's also important to note, since these are really small pieces and we're going to be turning and stuffing them, it's really good to backstitch at the beginning of each of these seams to make sure that the seams don't come undone as we turn them later on. Now I'm going through and I'm just clipping around the curves of all of the arms and legs. I'm also removing a little bit of the bulk on that bottom curve of each piece. This is just going to help them to lie a little bit better once we turn them right side out. Make sure as you clip around the curves, you can clip the bulk of the inseam, but make sure that you don't clip the actual seam. Try to get close to the seam, but not all the way to it. Also, with all these tiny pieces, I find it really helpful to clip all of my threads as I go instead of leaving the tails on there. I just get a little bit stressed out with all of that stringing hanging off of all the tiny pieces if I don't clip as I go. Now I'm going ahead and I'm turning all of these tiny pieces, which is the most annoying job ever unless you have these amazing hemostats. Hemostats are actually just a surgical tool that a lot of makers and crafters have started to use in projects. I love them for turning and stuffing small pieces. I honestly don't think that I would have the patience to do it any other way. The set that I'm using right now is actually a very large set. I would actually recommend a smaller pair of them, but these were the only ones I had on hand that day, so that's what I used while I was making this. But you can see you can stick them in there and it's really easy to turn them, and then I use this chopstick to go ahead and get the points nice and crisp right before I iron. While I was working on this project, I was really wishing that I owned one of those tiny irons for small pieces, and I might actually get one as I work on this project because this big iron was just so big with these little pieces. After I ironed the ears flat, I went ahead and I turned them. The inside of the ear, which is fabric B, I did on the inside of the fold, and I just iron them in place a little bit. When we sew them on, we're going to have them fold in half like that, so that's going to help us know how to position them better later on. I'm going to do the same thing with all the arms and legs. Once I've turned them with the hemostats, I'll go ahead and adjust them perfectly so that everything is turned just right with the chopstick, and then once it's turned just right, I'll iron it flat. Now it's time to get your stuffing out, and we are going to go ahead and use the hemostats again to stuff. You'll just put a little bit of a tuft of stuffing on the end of your hemostats, and you'll stick them right into your arm or leg. We'll do it the same way for all 4 appendages. And I am just going to stuff these halfway. I don't want my doll to be too stiff. I want its arms and legs to be floppy so it's a little bit movable. So I'm stuffing the bottom, so I guess the foot and the hand, nice and firmly. But then halfway, once it's halfway filled, I'm just stopping and we'll just sew it on like that so it'll be a little floppy. You can also use the back of your chopstick to push the stuffing down if you need to. You can tell I was watching a show while I filmed this, and my eyes keep going up to see what was happening in the show. You can tell it's a really good part. So now we're going to start working on the head. I have both the head pieces right sides facing up. I know it's hard to tell on this fabric because it's just white, but the correct side is facing up, and I'm marking with a removable marking pen the eye placement and the ear placement. The first side was easy because my pattern piece could be facing up, but on the second one I had to turn my pattern piece over because it's cut in reverse, and that would be really easy to trace if you had a light box. I didn't have my light box out, so what I did was I kept my paper pattern piece right side up, and I actually traced on the wrong side of the head And then because the ink of my removable marking pen kind of bleeds through the fabric, I was able to then turn it over and retrace what I had just traced. Once the tracing is done, you can start to stack the head pieces. You have the front of the head, right side facing up, and then you're going to put the ear on the ear placement guide with the open side down. And then you'll top that all off with a head back with the right side facing down. So the right sides of the head fabrics are facing together with the ear in the middle. And you'll go ahead and sew down one side of the head. It'll be the side where the ear is coming out. You're going to go ahead and do that again with the second head piece. Sew down the side. And again, you have right sides facing of those head pieces right now. I'm trying to be really good and trim my threads as I go. I'm also going to go ahead and clip those curves so that the head can be nice and round and not pucker once we stuff it. That little corner right there as the neck goes down is really important. So now that we're done with the head, we're going to go ahead and start assembling our body. I'm taking 2 body pieces and placing them right sides facing up. And then I'm going to take the legs that I've already sewn, and I'm going to center them along the middle, the center of each body piece, and I'm going to baste them in place. When I baste, I don't like to have to pull out my basting stitches because I'm lazy. So since I'm doing a 1/4 inch inseam, I just make sure that I baste with an inseam that is smaller than a 1/4 inch. And then when I go ahead and I sew these later, the real seam will hide that basting stitch. And it's okay if you don't have these exactly centered. Don't worry about measuring it or anything. Just eyeball it and that will be good enough. You can see how the leg's going to dangle down from that body piece. Now you're going to flip the leg back and you are going to sandwich it in between 2 body pieces. So you'll place another body piece on top. This time the right side is facing down, so the right sides are together of your 2 body pieces, and you're going to sew along the edge of the body piece. Now the trick is you're going to sew along the left edge of one and the right edge of the other one. You'll see what I mean in a moment. I'll open it up and show you. Once those are sewn, you can open up that seam and iron it in place. Once we have these ironed, we're going to add the head and the arms. So you're going to place these right sides facing up, so you'll notice that the seam is underneath. And you're going to place your arms right over that seam that you just sewed. Make sure that your arm, the curve of your arm is facing the same way as the nose of your bunny on the head. Once you have everything laid out like that, you can fold your head down and sew along that top edge. If you want, you can baste your arms in place first if you're not comfortable doing all 3 layers at the same time. I'm doing a little bit of a back stitch as I go over the arms because they will be tugged and played with a lot, and that will add a little bit of strength to the arms. Now we've got 2 halves of our bunny. We're going to pin them together. This is perhaps the most painful part of the project, just because you want to line up all of those seams. I like to line up each seam and put a pin in it like I'm doing here. And I'll go ahead, so that's the top of the head, then I'll go ahead and I'll match the seam of the front of the neck and I'll put a pin in, and I'll do that for the back of the neck as well. And the bottom, just the bottom of the piece. The hardest part is tucking the ears and the arms into that little body and then making sure that you don't sew over them. You're gonna sew all the way around and leave the bottom open to turn. And again, just take your time and go as slow as you need to go to make sure that you don't catch those ears or arms into your seam. I had to take it out and readjust a couple times just to make sure that everything was okay. And that's fine. This is the one seam that takes a little bit more patience than the rest. Once your seam has been sewn, you can go ahead and clip your curves. I especially find it important to clip right in that neck area on both sides. And then you'll turn your bunny right side out. You can use your chopstick to get the nose to point just right if you need to. Before stuffing, I went ahead and just stuffed. It seemed to be fine. And you can use your hemostats here as well. The opening's a little bit bigger, so my fingers were doing okay. But if you have shorter fingers, then the hemostats work great for this. I like to stuff it just a little bit to get the head nice and tight. And then I go ahead and I embroider the eyes. It's a little bit annoying to get your needle in there, as you can see, but I like having the stuffing in there so that my fabric is pulled tight. It's kind of the same as having your fabric on an embroidery hoop. It just pulls it nice and tight so that once your bunny is stuffed all the way, nothing puckers. And I'm going around with a running stitch around the outside of my circles, and then I'm going over the whole thing with a satin stitch or a fill stitch. Then I'm going ahead and putting 2 little stitches in to represent a nose. And I'm going to pull my needle through the open hole of the bunny, and I'm going to knot it on that raw edge of fabric because that's going to be turned in and hidden, and that way nobody can see your not. Right there, I was just spraying the face of the bunny. The removable marking pen that I used goes away with water. So I was just spraying the face of the bunny to remove the marking. Now I've knotted off my embroidery floss, and I'm just turning in the raw edges of that opening, and I am going to stitch it closed with a ladder stitch. You can actually turn this in and sew it on the machine as well if you want to get this done a little bit quicker. I think it looks a little bit neater by hand, but it's totally up to you, and especially if you're putting clothes on your doll, it really doesn't matter if this part is super neat, so that it will be hidden with clothes anyway. Once you knot off this thread and sink it into the animal, you are done with your bunny. I do one extra, okay, just kidding about being done with the bunny, sorry. One extra little detail, I like to iron the ears flat. It just makes them hang so much better. Okay, now you're done with your bunny. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more free patterns, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button below. It's free and it helps us out a ton. Thanks!